the next game, which kicks off at the exact same time, 1 o'clock GMT. In Murrayfield,
right.
we have the repeat of a World Cup classic,
yes,
as the Scots host Japan, this time at home, obviously, in Murrayfield.
Yeah.
1 o'clock kickoff. That's going to be reffed by Brendan Pickrell of New Zealand, Paul Williams and Andrea Piardi of Italy are going to be on the AORs.
Yeah.
And then Stuart Berry is the South African TMO.
That's right.
This is obviously a game that I think has been on the Scottish calendar for a while.
It has. Vengeance, and a chance to sign off the season with a win at home, which
they'll
is
feel
positive.
that they've improved massively since that
They
World
will,
Cup in
of course.
attitude and just performance level.
They'll also feel like they played badly, even for the team that went to that World Cup. They played a poor World Cup by their own standards, and they probably have improved since then as well. Like player for player, you look at the front rows that have taken to the field since then, and they've probably built on some of that depth too. But that was an instant classic, obviously 28-21 to Japan in that World Cup pool game, the decisive pool game that ultimately ended Scotland's World Cup campaign. They have met 8 times overall, with Scotland winning 7 of those. Interestingly, they've met thrice in Scotland, thrice in Japan, and twice on neutral soil. So this will be tipping it in the scales of more and more appearances in Scotland. The 3 tests since the kind of 2015 World Cup have been pretty close. Before then, there were a few blowouts because Japan were still a coming force.
The 2015 World Cup was a bad one because the Japan beat the Box and then had a short turnaround.
That's
to change some players, and then ended up shipping a massive scoreline against the Scots.
45-10, I believe it was.
And that ended up
knocking them
basically
out.
Costing
it created
them
history because they were the first team to win, was it 3 games and not qualify from a World Cup pool. So that was Scotland did them dirty, and they got vengeance.
They got their vengeance.
So it has fast become a very good rivalry, a very good global rivalry in modern rugby, and both sides kind of want to be quick attacking teams as well by kind of ethos and by mantra. They were both rocking up to that World Cup trying to be the quickest team to play rugby, and it was Japan in that instance a couple of years ago who were at that. But Scotland have been moving the ball very, very well, very nicely off set piece. They've kind of looked stronger in set piece. They've also had a better autumn campaign so far than Japan.
It's not just autumn. I mean, they've developed a balance to them. They're a much more balanced team than they ever were, Scotland. True. They used to be, we'll concede one to score one kind of job. They would pick guys like Hugh Jones in the midfield and just sacrifice defence for the sake of offence. Now they have a very solid defence, and they have an offence that still works really well, spearheaded by a really creative out half, a very good scrum half in Ali Price, who's really improving.
He's kicked on since the Lions tour. Not all of the Lions have, but he's definitely kicked on since that Lions tour.
His passing's great. He's starting to see the game a lot better than he used to. He makes less mistakes.
That's right.
His passing, as I said, was crisp, but he's got a lovely vision of the game on offence and complements Finn Russell's game perfectly.
True.
So too does Stuart Hogg, 2 tries last week, brilliant on the edge, and yet they do have a centre combination in Johnson and who's now back in, and Harris, that are
robust as well as good on the offence. They'll sit people down.
Miserly and speedy on the edge as well. Like Japan will not find it as easy to get outside of Chris Harris as they did at the World Cup.
No, especially when it's Nakano as well on debut. It was on debut last week, and he's got the 13 shirt, no sign of Lafayette, so that'll be a big test for him because Harris is a bit of a rock on the defence.
Indeed, and Duhan van der Merwe, he's gone to another planet in the past year. Looks one of the top wingers in the world. Was exceptional last week against his home country, which is a rare enough thing.
It is. Expat Safas normally struggle, but the Scottish ones didn't really last week. They did ultimately get worn down by the world champions, but they put in a good showing.
Hamish Watson was also missing for that game in Japan. They've got Scott Cummings back in the side.
That's exciting,
because they've been lacking perhaps a little bit for their monstrous second row.
Him and Gilchrist with Sam Skinner, I believe, on the bench is a lot of heft to be throwing Japan's way, particularly in the second half. And I think they've gone 6-2 as well on the bench, with a mind towards exactly that, being hefty. They've only the 2 horns, they've George Horn and King Horn covering the backs, but they have a lot of units to chuck in the second half as well off that bench. So they've become more bullish in the tight. They really have fancied their set piece, and it has been working in the Six Nations. They've been getting an edge on. They were scrummaging really well in Paris, really well in London, again in Twickenham.
Had a rough day last week.
Against the Box, but the Box we know are another level from even top level. They are the top.
And the drop off from a Springbok scrum to a Japanese scrum is quite vast.
Night and day. So they might it's a decent front row that they feel that they might find it a bit easier this week and find a chance to attack a bit more.
They'll be bullish. They'll be bullish of putting on a show here, because they're as I say, the nuts and bolts of their game, like just the individual elements, are all kind of there. Their offense is great, and it's wonderful. It functions off a set piece that is actually really, really competent.
True.
And even last week, Sam Skinner poached a line out like they lost, but they were combative, maybe more than competitive.
Yeah.
But they're right there. Like, they were a very solid set piece team.
They were there in the first half. They kind of got worn. All those guys like Richie, who played really well in the first half, got a little just worn down, which is what happens. It's an attritional game that you end up having to play against the box, and it's like less so against Japan. They don't put the squeeze on you anywhere near, like even by any tier 1 standards, much less the box. They're not that kind of team.
No question. And just looking at the Japanese form this year, the defensive issues that they've had. If I'm Scotland, I'm thinking there's no area of the game we shouldn't get an edge on here. We should win the scrum.
Attacking those centre pairing up the middle. You should be trying to find the edge, because they're not, like with Fafita on one wing instead of Fukuoka, they're less fast than they were in the World Cup.
Their wingers are actually probably maybe on balance worse than the Scottish wingers.
Yeah.
Would you rather have Doohan and Darcy Graham or Matsushima and Fafita? I think I'd rather have Doohan and Darcy Graham, to be honest.
Probably at the minute, based on form as well. Yeah, it's right that Matsushima comes in for Japan as well. He's on the bench,
great,
but he was one that remains there. But obviously, it's just a new look backline. They're slightly different in terms of their tempo. So Scotland should probably be looking to be the slightly quicker team, with Finn Russell passing very well and trying to just exert themselves on the gain line first, and then give Finn the ball, generate that quick ball, and just give Finn the platform.
A better service than he's had all year, and a chance to be patient and to pick his moments. Like against the box, it kind of had to be frantic to get outside them, because they weren't winning those contacts on the inside. But they'll have a chance to be a bit more patient in terms of how they find space,
more control,
and work the edge.
And also, if they can get a nudge on at scrum, or be solid at scrum and line out without as much issue here, then there's a chance for those beautiful strike moves that have been cutting the top level defenses apart on phase 1 pretty much for a year and a half.
This is not a top level defense right now, this Japanese team. So they should be very confident on the ball about dominating the contacts and getting tries in.
Good tape from Portugal last week in terms of how to run at them and cause problems.
Indeed. And on the other side of the ball, the defensive side of the ball, they should also be confident, and that's probably the biggest work on for them. They have become really, really good over the ball. And their defense from the midfield through Chris Harris, who was there at the World Cup but is twice the player now that he was then. That has become really elite as well. And I think a really good benchmark and a challenge for the Scottish team is to not allow the Japanese anything cheap on the other side of the ball.
Anytime you see Himeno, who is a big danger for them, or Labuschagne, even just blasting them out on the offensive and defensive cleanouts, just getting the contact area won thoroughly with commitment, and that'll be the first step in kind of getting the crowd on your behind you, and kind of making Japan question and doubt a little bit, and then try and exert control over the course of the 80 minutes. It's going to involve like a well balanced showing, their kicking acumen as well from 10 and 15 predominantly. Try and peg those Japanese back, test their exit ability, because they haven't been too great at that either, and to be honest, you can either catch them on the high ball or just win a kicking duel with the length that those guys can get as well. Just a nice controlled showing from the Scots here, and they'll be trying to slowly turn the screw and break them in a few key moments.
That's kind of one of the tests of it, is how mature can they be, because I would hold one thing against them. I'd hold is that they're perhaps a little immature sometimes. And perhaps can be bullied and can be rattled, and then sometimes as well in a matchup that they have the advantage on, could show up a little dialed out.
True.
And all of a sudden you're kind of playing that beach rugby that can get you into trouble,
and
defending a little like that as well. And if you do defend loose, the Japanese will cut you open and grab a couple of tries and make it more of a shootout than perhaps it should be.
Yes, they probably shouldn't engage in shootout mentality quite as much. They will be trying to strangle control of this in their home ground and try and deny Japan ins entirely, and just kind of slowly build your score and play your game the way you want to do it. Be proactive, be the more proactive team at home is definitely a good challenge. I think they will be buoyed by things like the Australia result a couple of weeks ago and the France result that ended the Six Nations. The fact that they would so often lose games like that and are developing a bit of a habit for edging tight ones means that even if they end up in that shootout that they were in the World Cup, say, a while back, they will feel a bit more confident of their ability to adjust in it and can wrestle control back and try and edge that game. But from minute one, they won't be aiming for that game.
Plan A isn't that game. For Japan, I suppose Plan A is that game.
Yes, make it a shootout, make it a kind of knife fight in the middle third, with Tekers being the dictating kind of factor in the game. If you can just we'll execute 4 times to your 3, and that's the game. And that's very often that has been what they do so well. They will be a little rocked. They'll be grateful and relieved to have got over the line last week against Portugal, because there was very nearly egg on their face. It was there, but for one last minute play that was a potential kind of big banana skin. It would have been their first defeat to a tier 2 side since they'd been officially made tier 1. Obviously that didn't come to pass, but they don't carry too much good form into this contest, to be honest. They have looked good in patches, but obviously Ireland blew them away. Their defence has been pretty toothless throughout this campaign by their own standards, because part of that World Cup game, that great intercept from Fukuoka, strip, rip and go, they were bringing defensive pressure that was testing top level teams. They smothered Ireland with their speed off the line. We haven't really seen a lot of that.
No.
We did
that back row. They got Michael Leach back in.
They do.
They got Lavish Gagny, who at his best is a ferocious tackler,
and Jimeno at number 8, which at the minute that is their best back row, and it's good to see them field it. And they need to be workhorses. Those guys will be tested, and every time you go to Murrayfield, you know that the back row are going to have to put in a serious shift, north of 10 tackles each. Getting in breakdowns, they will.
Even more is the point. Even looking at that type 5, they are. Prototypically, I think, a breakdown avoidance team on the offensive end, and they're going to have to be so careful minding the ball against these Scottish jacklers. I mean, every line break can be punished with a jackal steal, or exactly right, Watson steal, or falling at the feet of someone like that. Even a George Turner,
they all have an eye for it. It is one of their better qualities. Even in losing efforts, they have a knowledge of how to scrap in a breakdown and make it messy. The centres do as well. You can't get isolated.
So it's about offload. It's about keeping the ball alive, but minding the ball on your way down, trying to keep it alive as best you can, and then flicking it up to the next guy, trying to keep the pace of the game relentlessly high, slipping away from Scottish tackles, and let's be real, getting an advantage to kick the ball as well is not the worst thing, although you have to do that proactively and on the front foot, because chipping it to Stuart Hogg will be punished. You won't win that battle.
For Nagara and Matsuda to try and dictate when and how they kick and move them around the park same with Yamanaka at fullback as well. They'll all be tested. I'm sure Matsushima will help out, but
they kick a good 3 in Japan.
They do.
I'll tell you that, and if they can make sure that the game takes place largely in Scotland's territory, that'll be an advantage for them. That's where they might poach a penalty or 2. But the problem is that they're going to have to be so wise to the fact that Stuart Hogg likes to belt them 80 metres up the pitch,
indeed.
And then you can just lose that battle. So they'll have to have something on counter-attack, and the other thing they'll have to have is something off set piece. I want to see some Tony Brown magic back. It's kind of what this team used to have back in 2015, when they weren't quite as quick with your Fekito, not Fekito, I always do that.
Fafita on the wing.
No, with Fukuoka.
Oh, sorry, but
without
World
him,
Cup team.
Without Fukuoka on the wing, they're just not as quick. But what they had before he came in was real smarts off set piece, a bit like Scotland have now, where you're running maybe 2 or 3 screens, and the results in Matsushima on the edge. Exactly right. And I want to see them work all of that kind of magic, little dummy pods and clever first phase and second phase moves off set piece to try and bamboozle the Scots, just to get themselves an overlap, and from there they'll trust their skill set.
True. Big test for Nakano, who made his debut last week against Portugal. Grabbed a lovely try, looked pretty good, but in terms of that set piece strike play, they do a lot of distributing through 13 in that World Cup team, and that has been a pivot point for them. And Harris is the big defender that you want to occupy as well, so it's a massive test.
It's a bit more probably on Nakamura to be that guy. He was obviously the partner to Lafayette, but I think he's become more of a linchpin figure this year in terms of that offense.
True.
And it is on him, I think, to be that second distributor and to suck players in and maybe release the hard running of Nakano on his outside. So
I would hope so. They need to try and kind of make that They do have some bench depth as well to bring in. Gunter's a big fella. Tatafu is a useful unit.
Tatafu is great.
He's very useful. He'll probably be introduced likely for Michael Leach.
He'll perk one Scott at least.
He will. He is very good in the contact. Utamura as well, the 10 who did such damage in that World Cup game. He can come off the bench as well. They do look good at 10 in terms of their stocks. As you say, Matsuda kicks a lovely 3. He's very dialed technique. He hasn't really missed many this autumn at all. That hasn't been the problem for them. It's going to be guys in the tight like Cornelson and Moore in the rows going to have to do a lot of work. Those are 3 good second rows that the Scots are bringing to the party, counting the bench as well, and a hell of a lot of back row units.
And that defence just in general, as you say, getting out of the line and tackling, but also reading on the edge. haven't seen much evidence.
Sticking tackles. Yeah, sticking tackles was the first port of call. Some of the tries are just way too soft.
They were blown away by Ireland and then conceded a fair few against Portugal, including on the defensive maul.
It's true. Yeah, very concerning because Scotland's maul is very good.
Yeah,
they will need to be better in pretty much all areas. A lot of it will be like arriving to the pitch of the battle. It's the last game for both of these teams in 2021. Can they get a bit of kind of oomph in their performance that they have been lacking in all of the games so far, including that Portugal one, because that they were so buoyed and so geared up in that World Cup that they would have walked through walls through that pool, and they were fantastic. And we haven't really, it's not just the lack of the pace or the reaching in the back line, they haven't really brought that emotional energy. And since that World Cup as well, with the new personnel, they haven't quite stumbled on what their right attacking tempo is either. They haven't really been able to kind of dictate things that way, because they've been kind of start and not really sure of themselves. And you'd want to be, it'll start with being emotionally charged, but you want to see a more proactive, more positive showing here.
Yeah, it's been a rough tour for Japan.
This is probably the game that they would have been targeting in this series if they were to be targeting a game at all.
I don't think they're much of a chance in this game, unfortunately. I think the Scots, who I've been very impressed with, will win it. It's a question of how dialed in they are, and obviously if maybe Japan can pull something out of the hat and bring out something close to their best.
Complacent, or if they struggle with the favourites tag, which can sometimes happen, then maybe they throw a pick to one of the Japanese and be generous that way. But I think
the bounce back from the 60-5 defeat wasn't much. They backed that up by struggling to beat Portugal.
It's true.
They have dropped down a level, and this listen, it was probably always going to be a tough tour for them. Scotland obviously having all of these Six Nations teams having just more reps since COVID anyway. They were quicker to come back than Japan were, and just the fact that they've been targeting this game, they remember what happened in the World Cup. Ireland were the same. It was probably just destined to be a rough November for them, and I think probably Scotland will take this one by a score or two, but Japan will be back in time for 2023. They mark my words. No doubt about that.
Yes, they will be at that World Cup to compete, no doubt. They have a lot of good resources the top league is taking away, but it feels a little soon in this autumn series, and I think that it'll be Scotland who will end their campaign and year on a win.
I think they'll do it comfortably. If you have any score predictions or anything like that, let us know in the comments down below.
Absolutely.
But for now, we're going to move on. Thanks for watching the Overlap Rugby podcast. If you enjoyed that video, please be sure to like and subscribe. And hey, if you have an opinion of your own, if you disagree with what we're saying, leave a comment down below. We might just get back to you.